Expedia and Visit Scotland invite you to come step into centuries of history that await in Scotland. Castles steeped in legend, walk along cobblestone streets. Come share the warmth of stories passed down through generations. This is a place with a past that is fully present today and all yours to explore. Plan your Scottish escape today at expedia.com/Visit Scotland.
Study and play come together on a Windows 11 PC. And for a limited time, college students get the best of both worlds. Get the Unreal College Deal. Everything you need to study and play with select Windows 11 PCs. Eligible students get a year of Microsoft 365 Premium and a year of Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with a custom color Xbox wireless controller. Learn more at windows.com/student offer. While supplies last. Ends June 30th. Terms at aka.ms/collegepc.
When you need to build up your team to handle the growing chaos at work, use Indeed Sponsored Jobs. It gives your job post the boost it needs to be seen and helps reach people with the right skills, certifications, and more. Spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all your boxes. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. That's Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need a hiring hero? This is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs.
Welcome to Generals of World War II, The Art of Command. I'm your host, John Viscardo, and I'm joined today by the great Stuart Vanderkooi, all the way from West Point, New York. For those of you not familiar with Stuart, who's on our podcast before, he's an instructor and a student of history at West Point, and he was recently back from Normandy, which is the subject of our podcast today. We're going to talk about the D-Day invasion. Before we get to that, Stuart has a disclaimer for us.
So the opinions expressed herein in this podcast are my own, and they do not necessarily represent the views or policy of the United States government, the United States Army, the Department of War, or the United States Military Academy.
Thank you for that. And as I mentioned, Stuart just got back from Normandy. It's his second trip there. And for those of us who've never been, like myself, how moving is it? How dramatic is it? How well maintained is it? Like, can you give us kind of an insight of what Normandy is like today?
Absolutely. It's probably one of the most memorialized, if not the most memorialized battlefields in the world. I mean, everywhere you turn, there's a museum, there's a monument, there's Canadian flags, British flags, U.S. flags everywhere. It's pretty incredible to be there. And it's, the most moving part, I think, for most people is going to for most Americans is going to the American cemetery and seeing that, all those perfectly aligned headstones and the flags, and it's incredible.
Yeah. No, I'd like to get there someday. And for those of us wondering why I'm releasing this episode on June 5th instead of June 6th, Stuart has pointed out the Minesweeper started on June 5th, correct?
That's right. Yeah, it's key operation there that kind of gets overshadowed by the rest of it, but very important to get those mines out of the way so you can get everybody across the channel.
Absolutely. So it was launched on June 6, 1944, known as D-Day, the largest amphibious invasion in history. Why does this battle get all or most of the publicity in the European front?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's an interesting one to think about. I think it's that, if you ask the average American with not much knowledge of military history, I think at least they'll have heard about D-Day. And for many people, I think D-Day represents the Second World War in the popular memory, right? It's the launching of the finally getting across the channel and taking the fight to the Germans in Western Europe. Of course, there's North Africa and the Mediterranean before that, but this is the big one, the big deal. And for the older generation, there's, the Longest Day movie, right, with all the who's who of Hollywood back in the day, based on a book written by Cornelius Ryan, who was, I believe, in a B-25 on D-Day, and he went back and wrote down what he saw, and that became a movie. And then, for my generation, we've seen Saving Private Ryan, and when you think of Omaha Beach or you think of D-Day, that's kind of what comes to mind. I think the other piece of it is it's just the dramatic character of the D-Day landings. There's years of preparation. It's in Eisenhower's word. It's the great crusade towards which we've striven these many months. This is the Allies coming together, air, land, and sea, and then they're going to get off of boats, cross open ground, and storm the beaches at Normandy. And this will open up the gates into German-held Europe.
Yeah. And you mentioned movies there, and there's one coming up soon, Pressure with Brendan Fraser, which talks about our next topic. The D-Day invasions aimed to establish a Western front against Nazi Germany and begin the liberation of Western Europe. As you pointed out, commanded overall by Dwight D. Eisenhower. So let's discuss the weather piece of this. The battle is famously delayed, I believe, by 1 day because of inclement rain forecasts. Why is good weather, or I guess fair weather, so crucial?
Well, most of the tactical operations need a degree of good weather. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it needs to be good enough. For the air forces, the bombers, there's a huge bombing effort. Strategic bombers are pulled off of the bombing German industry and cities, and they're going to go in and try and smash the defenses on the beach. And they need good enough weather to do that. They're going to bomb railways inland. The paratroopers need the C-47s need to be able to see the drop zones to release their gliders. So you need some clear weather for that. If the sea state is too high and the seas are too rough, your landing craft can get swamped. Everybody can get blown off course, and it can turn very quickly into a disaster. In talking about the planning for all of that, the Allies have been learning lessons in their previous amphibious landings. They've done Operation Torch into North Africa. They've done Husky into Sicily, Avalanche into Salerno. And in Sicily, and Salerno especially, bad weather impacts the paratroop, the airborne operations, scatters them all over the place, and that leads to isolated pockets that the Germans can pick off. Luckily, they're able to recover from that in both of those instances, but they've learned a lot of lessons. You need good enough weather to be able to put this amount of equipment and men ashore and get everything to work together.
Agreed. Okay, the D-Day invasion involved forces from the United States, United Kingdom, Canada, and other allied nations. How many troops overall did the Allies have, and how many did the Germans have?
So for the Allies, they're going to land about 160,000 troops into Normandy on June 6th alone. But there's going to be several echelons that follow that, and eventually Normandy is going to become the key location where they're getting troops and equipment ashore. So a lot more to come. But I like to look at, with the troop structure and the division breakdown when I think about this. And the limiting factor for the Allies is really the amount of landing craft, right? So they get enough landing craft and preparation done to bring 6 divisions onto 5 beaches. You've got 3 U.S. Divisions, 2 British and 1 Canadian, plus the 2 U.S. airborne divisions and 1 British airborne division that are going to land in that initial assault. But also on the Allied side, it's important to note the French resistance are heavily involved, cutting communications lines, sabotaging bridges, railroad lines, ambushing German columns. And there's over 1,000 warships alone that take part in this assault. Now on the German side, across the entire Atlantic wall, from the southern Atlantic coast of France all the way up to northern Norway, there's 58 divisions. 33 of these are so-called static divisions, which means they don't have a lot of motorized transport.
Are these second-line troops?
You could think of them that there's some reserve divisions. There's Osttruppen, Eastern troops, which are Russians, Poles, prisoners that the Germans have forced into service in German uniforms, but will probably, in a lot of cases, surrender to the first Allied troops that put up stiff resistance. Now, the main German army troops are mostly behind the lines, and these are your Panzer Grenadier divisions, your SS, there's some SS Panzer divisions, normal Wehrmacht Panzer divisions, and on June 6th, there's probably the best German troops there, a Fallschirmjäger unit that fights against the U.S. airborne troops up in the Cotentin Peninsula. And then there's the 21st Panzer Division, which makes a counterattack on June 6th. And they actually just get to the beaches, but they're thrown back by a impressive and stiff anti-tank defense by the British.
The invasion targeted 5 Normandy beaches: Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno, and Sword. Which forces were going to which beach?
So starting from west to east, on the west beach is Utah. That's the U.S. 4th Infantry Division. 2 U.S. divisions land at Omaha. That's the 29th and the 1st Infantry Division, the big red one. And then on Gold Beach is the British 50th Infantry Division. I know it says the 7th Armored Division there as well. They do land on June 6th, but they're more of a follow-on unit that's going to land after the initial assault. Canadian 3rd Infantry Division lands on Juno Beach, not to be confused with the British 3rd Infantry Division, which lands on Sword. And Sword Beach is the easternmost beach, north of Caen.
Where is Daredevil? I'm right here. Don't miss the return of Marvel Television's Daredevil Born Again.
So what's next?
I feel liberated.
We're gonna take this city back.
Over medicated.
In an all-new season, now streaming only on Disney+.
They're hunting us. It's time we started hunting them.
I can work with that.
This should be tons of fun.
Marvel Television's Daredevil Born Again, now streaming only on Disney+.
This episode is brought to you by Perfect Bistro Cat Food. Hey guys, today I'm interviewing my cat about his perfect bistro food. Percy, you seem to be a big Perfect Bistro fan. Care to comment? Totally. What do you like about it? You love the high-quality ingredients? And the delicious flavors, of course. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Listen to Percy, guys. Visit perfectbistro.com to try it for your cat.
And you also have it on the map here, the paratroopers. The invasion's preceded by massive airborne operations. Over 20,000 paratroopers dropped behind enemy lines. As the Band of Brothers TV show demonstrated so well, these paratroopers were meant to wreak havoc behind enemy lines, secure bridges and roads. Why is this so critical?
Yeah, so the U.S. 82nd Airborne Division and 101st Airborne Division land behind Utah Beach, and their job is to help create this lodgement, right? And a lodgement is you've got various bridgeheads or beachheads, 5 of them, but you need to link these together. And that's key for the Allies because that's kind of pushing the ball, the decisive point, getting that over the hill. Once you've linked your beaches together, then you have mutually supporting lines of communication. You can create a defensive perimeter, repel the German counterattack, and then continue to expand. So the airborne troops, the U.S. airborne troops are securing, most importantly, I think, the causeways that cross the areas that the Germans have flooded to create a natural obstacle against the paratroopers and the landings. So those causeways will help get the forces off Utah Beach, link them in with Omaha. They're also capturing places, famously St. Mary Glace, Carenton, where these are road hubs, and you hold that piece of key terrain. And then for the British airborne, their job is to secure bridges and roads, but really it's those bridges over the Orne River and to the east of Westerham and Caen. That's a primary attack route for the German counterattack. So they're holding that left flank for the Allied forces and have a critical role there.
Okay. I did want to ask you what you think the percent chances of failure were here. There was we're not going to get into it on this podcast, but there was an earlier raid. It's called the Dieppe raid in 1942 that went horribly wrong. It was a Canadian invasion in northern France. Yeah. So my first question is, do you think it's 10%, 20%, 50% chance of failure? And did Eisenhower really draft a letter in case of failure?
Yeah, putting a number on it is hard. Maybe I'll say, just throwing it out there, maybe 10%, 20%. Okay. I say that just because this is so well thought out and planned. It's just an incredible coalition effort between the British and the Canadian and the US and the other allied forces that as long as they can get through the minefield, that they have a weather window, and then they can make that initial assault onto the beaches and then link them up. Those are the points of greatest risk for this assault. Once it's all linked together and they defeat the German counterattack, then I think they've, the Germans have very little chance of fully repelling this and collapsing this beaches. Because at this point, once the British and Americans and the Allies can land all their men and material, it's at this point in the war going to overwhelm the Germans. The second question there, Eisenhower did have a letter. You can see it online. It's handwritten, and it speaks to his leadership, right? He says, in the event of failure, we made the best effort. All the troops and soldiers and pilots, everybody did the best they could, and the responsibility is mine and mine alone, and I accept that responsibility. And he kept that in his pocket and didn't really share it with anybody, but it seems like he had that thought out and drafted already in the event that this goes sideways.
And I give him massive credit there, because even writing the letter is somewhat defeatist, but I think it just shows that he doesn't leave anything to chance. He had everything buttoned up. Even the 10, 15% chance of losing, he had it planned.
Right. And maybe he thought it was higher. I mean, I know that was a stressful time for he's smoking something like 4 packs a day and drinking a lot of coffee, but I can't imagine the burden of command that was on his shoulders, trying to make that decision, and I think the movie we talked about, the pressure, will show the tense and the drama of that moment. Do we go? Do we not go? Do we delay? Can we? It's not like you can just turn this whole operation on a dime. Once it gets going, you can't stop it.
Let's go to the other side of the lines. The Allies were facing strong German defenses organized under Erwin Rommel, the Desert Fox, including the Atlantic Wall fortifications. So what was the German strategy for defense, and how did Rommel's plan differ from those of his superiors?
So when you look at the German side, it's interesting, because just comparing it to the level of Allied planning compared to the Germans is vastly different. I mean, the Allies have thought through this operation for years and planned everything down to the T, and built in redundancies and every possible scenario as far as they could know, they've thought through. The Germans know that an attack, yes, the Allies are going to come across into Western Europe at some point. I think they know that, but how exactly they're going to defeat this attack is the plan is, let's do what the Germans do best. If we're the Germans, well, we've got powerful panzer formations. We'll concentrate them together, or we'll counterattack and throw the Allies back into the sea. But there's a command structure problem, because Rommel's subordinate to Field Marshal Rundstedt, and Rundstedt and Rommel disagree about how are we going to employ our panzer divisions. Rundstedt wants to keep them further back away from the beaches, concentrated, and then they'll launch a concentrated panzer counterattack. And Rommel has experience fighting the Allies in North Africa, and the thing that he's worried about is their air superiority, because he thinks Rundstedt's plan isn't going to work well, because you got to drive all the way up to or take rail lines. You're going to be hampered by the Germans call them Yabos, the fighter bombers, but the Allied air forces are just going to wreak havoc on your columns trying to reinforce. You'll only be able to move at night. If we got a chance of stopping this invasion, it's got to happen on the first day or two. We need our panzer divisions close to the beaches so they can counterattack immediately, because once the Allies get a lodgment, then there's really not a good chance.
So Hitler's involvement was to kind of negotiate between these two plans, and it sounds like he kind of just waffled between the two of them.
Right. Yeah, and it's the classic German meddling that characterizes a lot of the late war strategy. And Hitler's made himself the authority for releasing some of the panzer divisions. He's asleep initially they're afraid to wake him up. And then it's further delayed when Hitler and other elements of the German high command aren't convinced that this is the actual invasion, right? They think, well, in credit to the Allied deception effort, they think that Normandy is a diversion and the main attack is coming somewhere else, probably at Calais, right? So it takes a while for them to realize, no, this is the real deal. This is the actual invasion, and we've got to muster as many forces as we can to counterattack.
Yeah, looking at the map here, Omaha Beach saw the heaviest fighting and casualties due to terrain and fortified German positions. So why the slow going in this area, and why were there so many casualties, do you think?
Well, I think you hit it there with the terrain. I mean, the Allies know this is probably going to be the toughest place to land, but it's really the only option they have between Utah and Gold Beach. They've got to land somewhere in that area, and the terrain dictates it, right? And a feature of Omaha Beach that is different than the others is it's got these bluffs, and you see this when you go to Omaha Beach, and it's displayed in Saving Private Ryan. There's bunkers up on the hill, but the bunkers don't look exactly like they do in Saving Private Ryan, where they're firing straight down onto the shore. How the Germans have constructed they're called Widerstand nests, which are their strong points, their fortifications. And you go there and you see this, and this is one of the advantages of seeing it with your own eyes. You realize they've built these bunkers into the hills, so unless they get a direct hit, they're not going to be knocked out by naval bombardment. And the guns don't face out towards the sea in most cases. They face down parallel to the beaches, so they can shoot down this entire stretch of beach with 88 millimeter, 57 millimeter, their machine guns, sweep that whole beach with enfilading fire and cause a lot of casualties. The whole beach is pre-sighted with artillery fire. The bombardment doesn't disrupt the communications between the forward observers and the inland batteries. So they're able to quickly call artillery, and that causes a lot of casualties. And then lastly, to get off of Omaha Beach up these bluffs, you've got two prominent draws that the Allies need to seize, one at Vierville, one at Colville. And the Germans know this too, right? So they've constructed this whole thing. It's going to funnel these guys into those draws through the obstacles and make it a very deadly area. But Omaha Beach, some guys get ashore and have no problem. But other entire companies are almost entirely wiped out. So it also comes down to luck. Where do you land? Are you scattered? Are you together? Are you the unlucky guy that jumps off the boat and you're right in a pre-sighted German defensive area?
Okay, let's talk about the Allied deception role, Operation Fortitude, which misled Germany into expecting an invasion at Pas de Calais. Notably, America's best general, George Patton, has a decoy role. Why is this? Is this related to him slapping soldiers earlier in the war? Is this to throw the Germans off? And what is this dummy army? Is it just inflatable tanks, or is there actual troops assigned to them?
Yes. So Patton and Eisenhower, their relationship, I think, plays into this. To what extent, I'm not too sure. But I do know that the Germans probably fear Patton the most out of all the Allied commanders. So it's a good plan to put Patton in charge of the so-called U.S. First Army Group, which is part of the deception plan. Because if you're a German, it's like, okay, where is Patton going to go? His army group they're making it look like he's going to go across Calais, right? So that's one of the components of the deception plan. But there's also, they're using double agents to feed false intelligence. They even hire an actor that looks like Bernard Montgomery to go survey different places so the Germans report back, yeah, Montgomery's there. This might be where it's coming. But there's an army group that supposedly is going to go into Norway, making the Germans think that's where the invasion is going to come from.
Yeah.
But Patton's going to come over later with the Third Army and play an important role in the later on Normandy campaign, liberation of Paris, and drive to the Rhine.
Okay. We mentioned earlier that weather delays nearly postponed the invasion, but a brief window allowed the attack to proceed. So, what time did everything kick off on June 6th, and what was the Allied Navy's role?
So June 6th, the first troops to land are British glider troops that land around Pegasus Bridge, just shortly after midnight. And it's impressive to go there and see where they land these gliders. I mean, I can't imagine the skill needed to recognize that terrain and get there in the middle of the night, put these gliders down right next to the bridge, and just completely surprise the German defenders. So the British airborne lands there. They knock out the Merville battery, and then the American paratroopers land about an hour later. Those are glider troops and paratroopers that jump in behind Utah Beach. Now, the beach assault kicks off on the U.S. side. First troops land around 0630, and then for the British, it's about 7:30, and then the Canadians land a little bit later. But that's part of the plan, is the tide. It all has to do with the tides. When are the tides going to be the best? When can we see the beach obstacles and get ashore safely?
And the Navy's role, obviously they want to soften up the shore defenses and batteries, but they can't get too close to the coast, right?
Right. So the first component of the Navy in a key operation is the minesweepers, and it's little smaller ships, but they've got to go through and clear channels, lanes through the big minefield that's in the English Channel, so that the invasion force can get through. And they actually start a day earlier and clear those lanes. And then there's everything from small frigates and corvettes all the way up to some of the big older battleships, USS Nevada and HMS Warspite. They're further offshore, and I think the big guns on the battleships are mostly bombarding further inland, and they're trying to knock out the artillery that the Germans have behind the lines. There are some ships that can get in close to the beaches, and those are destroyers do great work at Omaha Beach. There's some cruisers that assist at Point du Hoc, British cruisers on Juno Beach. So there's some pretty heroic efforts by the crews of those smaller ships that can get in close and lay devastating fire on German defenses.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the innovative technology that was deployed, specifically the Mulberry Harbors, which are portable artificial ports to sustain the Allied invasion force. This probably is why the Germans thought the Allies were going to go to Pas de Calais, right, for the ports. So to have these mulberries is probably very helpful.
Yes, and as far as I know, I don't think the Germans have seriously considered that the Allies can even do this. And it's an incredible engineering effort and logistical innovation, and the Allies know that the problem with seizing a port is ports are a lot easier to defend. Dieppe showed that. Calais would be very difficult. Cherbourg. They want to capture these ports eventually, but in the case of Cherbourg, the Germans destroy most of the port facilities. They sink ships in the harbor, and it takes weeks and weeks to, in some cases, months to clear this out and repair it. So, and the Allies know they don't have that kind of time. Like, this whole thing hinges on being able to get follow-on forces ashore and expand the beachheads. So, yes, the mulberries facilitate that, and they're towing these huge concrete caissons, floating them across the channel, sinking them offshore because they got to create a breakwater. They're sinking old ships. They've got some mobile breakwaters, and you want to be able to bring your big cargo ships in, offload, and then drive all your equipment onto the beaches. One interesting thing that shows how hard this operation is if you look at the Gaza pier that I think 2024, we tried to do something similar, and we did this in World War II. But the pier in the Mediterranean, which has a lot calmer water, is my understanding, is that ran into some challenges in that the pier didn't work out, right? I'm just saying that it's like even in 2024, this is a very difficult thing to do, but the Allies were able to pull this off.
Well, by the end of D-Day itself, about 156,000 Allied troops have landed at Normandy. So what were the overall casualties on each side?
So the casualties are, when you start to look into this, it's hard to get an exact number, and there's a lot of reasons for that. We can get estimates, right?
Yeah.
But when people have tried to look at this, there's some names are spelled differently, or the rest of the war is going on, right? There's a lot of guys who die on June 6th, not on Normandy, but in the Pacific, in Italy, and everywhere else that the Allies are also fighting simultaneously. So that makes it difficult. I think there's approximately 10,300 Allied casualties on D-Day. 4,427 are KIA. And I think the best numbers that you can get are from the National D-Day Memorial. Has done a lot of work to try and categorize and research the dead on D-Day. On the German side, it's even more uncertain. And there's Germans getting killed by aircraft as they're coming up to the beaches. There's those that are killed or captured on the beaches. But I think it's several thousand on the German side. A lot deadlier fighting is going to follow in June and July, right? The deadliest fighting is yet to come in the Normandy campaign and the Bocage.
Yeah, it leads me to my next question. The invasion established a crucial foothold, leading to the breakout from Normandy the following month, July 1944. So why did the breakout take so long? Was it supply related? Was it the Germans were fighting a stiff resistance? And did the Germans really have any realistic chance to push them back in the ocean?
I think a lot of it has to do with terrain, and famously especially on the American side, the Bocage country, right? These are the hedgerows built up over hundreds of years. Farmers are clearing fields, stacking rocks, and they're building windbreaks, and then you get vines and trees that grow into these things and make very formidable obstacles. It's not good tank country. So if you got to fight through these, it's infantry that have to go hedgerow to hedgerow, and the Germans figure out some good tactics to defend them, and makes that fighting very difficult. So it just takes a while for them to get through this terrain on the U.S. side. And then on the Canadian and British side, Operation Goodwood is the attempt to seize Caen. It doesn't go as well as they planned. There's heavy losses for the Commonwealth troops. But what it does do is it pulls a lot of German forces away to that area and opens up the successful breakout, which is Operation Cobra on July 25th, where the U.S. is able to break out of the Normandy lodgment and do their follow-on operations after that.
So after that breakout, there's pretty much no chance for the Germans to push them back in the ocean.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. Rommel probably was right. Of all the German commanders, that if the Germans were going to stop this, they needed to stop it in the first couple days. Maybe take out one of the beaches, cause enough problems, somehow prevent the Allies from getting ashore. But Allied naval supremacy and air supremacy are huge, right? If the Luftwaffe and the Kriegsmarine can't disrupt the landings, and the Allies secure their lines of communications back to England, then they're bringing the industrial might of the United States and the British and all of their troops and weapons and supplies. And at that point, I don't think the Germans have a real shot at stopping the landing. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen elsewhere.
I think that's a great point you just raised. I didn't really think about it. Basically, it's three arms of the military against one. The Germans have their infantry and tanks, but like you said, the Kriegsmarine can't really get in there. I mean, maybe other than a submarine. Then the German Air Force is very limited, where the Allies have all three arms fighting in this battle.
Right. Oh, and by the way, there's a little Soviet offensive going on at around the same time, Operation Bagration, right? Yep. Which is this 13 fronts essentially annihilates Army Group Center. So the Germans are dealing with the even bigger fight that's going on the Eastern Front.
Well, D-Day ultimately paved the way for liberation of Paris and the ultimate defeat of Nazi Germany in 1945. What is the legacy of D-Day?
So the way I think about this is D-Day represents the start of the Allied campaign into Western Europe that's going to eventually lead them to invade Germany and bring about surrender of the Nazis in the German war machine. But there's a lot of hard fighting that has to happen in that year between 1944 and 1945. But D-Day opens the way into Germany, right? This is, for years, the Allies have known that they've got to go across the Channel, get into Western Europe, liberate France. And are the Germans going to win the war at this point? I would say almost certainly not. But how long it lasts, how many casualties it's going to cost to bring about unconditional surrender, that still depends on how well the Allies do. But the first step of this is getting ashore. And that goes back to, why is D-Day such a big part of our historical memory? And again, it's the start. It's the Great Crusade, as Eisenhower says, getting men and equipment ashore to bring about the end of the war.
Yeah, it's an interesting legacy. I think it does get a little too much publicity because people say, well, once D-Day happened, the war was over. The Germans had no chance. And I'm like, well, they still had to fight across France, Germany, still had the Battle of the Bulge. The Soviets still had to plow through Eastern Europe. So I don't think D-Day was the end of the war. You still had to beat the Germans.
Exactly.
But in terms of planning an amphibious operation that large and that well, I think Eisenhower should get a ton of credit, and his staff and his generals for how well it went.
Yeah, all the way from the planners, to the Navy. The more you explore this battle and see the actions of individual soldiers and lieutenants and sergeants, taking charge, and those guys are doing an incredible heroic effort to shape their little part of the battle, right? And if you get enough of those things to go well, that's going to drive the operations, which drives the strategy, right? So credit all across the board, but I absolutely agree. I don't know if we'll ever see anything like this again. That scale of amphibious, air, naval, it would be an incredible sight to see, that the ships moving across the Channel, the planes going in, the naval bombardment. We don't have anything like that to compare it to, that scale of conventional operations.
Yeah, indeed. Well, thank you for that, Stuart. Fabulous work as always, the D-Day invasion. And I appreciate your insight. I know you just visited there. That was really good to hear. And I'd like to get over there sometime to just see it.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's so much here to learn. And I hope to continue to learn more about this battle and visit there with other people and share with my cadets these stories. And I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about this.
No, it's great having you on. Stuart Vanderkooi from the United States Military Academy at West Point. We appreciate your time. Thank you, sir.
Absolutely.
Tires matter. They're the only part of your vehicle that touches the road. Tread confidently with new tires from Tire Rack. Whether you're looking for expert recommendations or know exactly what you want, Tire Rack makes it easy. Fast, free shipping, free road hazard protection, convenient installation options, and the best selection of Continental tires. Go to TireRack.com to see their Continental test results, tire ratings, and reviews, and be sure to check out all the special offers. TireRack.com, the way tire buying should be.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
Absolutely. Thank you, John.